I'm going to rank every single Premier League team based on the business that they did this transfer window. And look, there's a lot of signings. There's a lot of big names coming in. A lot of teams did a lot of business. I do think actually compared to recent transfer windows, I feel like PSR had a massive part to play in actually limiting how much each team could spend, even though there were still a few teams that got their money off regardless. But let's go through each team. Let's speak about their business. Did they get an A? Did they get a B, C, D, F? Have they failed the window? Are they the losers of the window? Are they the winners? We're going to talk about every single team. First team that we're going to talk about is Arsenal. Now, where do we rank Arsenal based on their transfer window? Let me say this, yeah? I'm going to talk about the 3 players that they signed. Calafiori, Mikel Merino, Raheem Sterling. I think all 3 of those players are good players. I think all 3 of those players offer something that Arsenal didn't have before the window. I think all 3 of those players add depth to 3 positions that maybe Arsenal struggled in last season. Left central midfield, left back, and left wing / right wing. Sterling can kind of play across the front 3. But when I look at Arsenal last season, the biggest issue I fought with Arsenal, especially when it came to knockout competition, knockout cups, did they have enough X factor? Did they have enough players that when Arteta's system was kind of starting to slow down to a halt, players that could kind of get on the ball and make moments happen out of nothing? Like when you look at the best teams in the world, Madrid have more X factor players than anybody else. City, obviously, we know the quality of the De Bruynes, the Fodens, the Erling Haalands. Obviously, you have Gundogan coming back as well now, too. When I look at Arsenal, yes, they have very, very talented players, but players that can really get on the ball and make moments happen out of nothing and kind of like break games on their own outside of the system. I look at Saka and I look at Odegaard, offensively anyways. The rest, for me, are kind of hit and miss. And when the system is kind of falling, you kind of see their faults really, really highlighted. I thought that going into this window, Arsenal had the chance to really make a massive splash and really make a statement signing that announced to the Premier League that yes, they were ready to take the leap over City. And again, I think all 3 of the signings that they made are good signings. But do I feel like Arsenal have done enough from the start of the window to the end to really say they took that leap over City? I don't think they did. And you could say it's very difficult to do that. I 1000% get it. First of all, signing the quality of X-Factor player I'm speaking about, it's very difficult to do in a window. You're talking about having to break the bank. You're having to approach clubs that probably don't even want to sell that player in the begin with. I'm thinking of the Leaos, the Rodrigos. Real Madrid and Milan have no intention to sell that player, but you have to show the ambition to get them out of the club. First of all, by spending massive money and by even be willing to go into negotiations with those clubs. So I get it's very difficult, but I feel like Arsenal are at a stage in their development now where that's the next caliber of player that they have to go and get. The squad is a good squad. 1 to 23, you have good players in there. You have different profiles. But I feel like Arsenal are now at a stage in their development where the next caliber of player is a high level, like I'm talking superstar individual. And I feel like this window was a massive opportunity to go after that player. And I feel like, forget about failing to even land that player. I don't think they showed enough ambition to even target that player to begin with. So if you were an Arsenal fan looking at this window, any Arsenal fans in here, do you really believe that your team has done enough this window to bridge the gap between City? I don't think you have. Me personally, I don't think you have. Are we doing sells as well? We can as well too. You guys did some good business. I think getting the money you did for Nketiah, even though it took a while. Nketiah got off the books. Smith Rowe got off the books. Reece Nelson went on loan to Fulham, obviously, as well too. But yeah, man, I don't think Arsenal, like, it's not a bad window. Don't get it twisted. But I think if I were an Arsenal fan, it would be a disappointing window for me because there was a bit more to do. Now, that doesn't, like, look, I'm gonna have teams that have better windows than Arsenal on this list. That doesn't mean I think those teams are better teams than Arsenal. That doesn't mean I think those teams will finish above Arsenal. I still expect Arsenal to push City, and I do have them narrowly missing out, but still finishing second. But if we're just judging on how well you did in the window, I don't think Arsenal had a great window, in my opinion. I look at what they did last season, signing a Declan Rice. That's a signing that changes the outlook of your team. And I think there was an opportunity to do that maybe in a more offensive position on the pitch. And I think Arsenal have failed to even attempt to make that kind of signing. With that being said, I have Arsenal between a B and a C, to be honest with you. And this might sound harsh. I think the Sterling signing just about makes it a B. Let me tell you why. Sterling, as you guys know, was not a player I wanted to see at United. When those links came out, I was very, very annoyed. First of all, because I look at his wages, I look at his age, I look at his profile, I look at how he's on the decline. That's not a player that I want to see part of a young Man United team that's looking for a new identity, that's trying to build under Ineos, that's trying to build for the future. But for Arsenal, the position that they're in, and what they need, I actually think this move is genius from Arsenal. First of all, they're paying less than half his wages. Second of all, there is zero obligation to buy him at the end of the year. Third of all, for what Arsenal are right now, looking to just compete, signing a player of Sterling's experience, and I still believe Sterling is a good player that can offer something to good teams. I think Arsenal truthfully have pulled Chelsea's pants down with this move. And I think that move right there rescues it from being a C. I'll give them a B. Because before that, signing Calafiori was a good player, but at the moment, doesn't even look like he features in Arsenal's strongest side. And Mikel Merino, again, good player, improves their depth in midfield, but isn't like completely changing life for Arsenal. That for me would have been a C window. But I think getting Sterling right at the end of the window, for how much they got him for, I give them a B. I didn't say Sterling is great anymore, but he's still a good player. And to get him for less than half his wages and not have to buy him at the end of the window, I think Arsenal pulled Chelsea's pants down here. I'm going to put them B for now. We'll revisit this. Second team, Aston Villa. Now let's talk about Aston Villa's window. Villa had a very, very busy transfer window. Signing Amadou Onana from Everton for 60 million euros. Ian Maatsen off Chelsea for 44.5 million euros. Cameron Archer, obviously signing him back from Sheffield United for 16. Bringing back Jadon Philogene from Hull for 16. Samuel Illing Jr. for 14, who they later go on to loan out to Bologna. Bring in Ross Barkley for a very, very good fee. And then on the flip side as well too, selling Moussa Diaby for 60 million euros, practically recouping everything they bought for him a year ago. Selling Douglas Luiz for 51 million. Selling Cameron Archer back to Southampton for profit. Villa were very, very busy this window. And obviously they have to be, right? Playing in the Champions League this season. But I actually think Villa have had a very, very good window. And in my opinion, Amadou Onana has the potential to go down as the best signing of this window. Now me, when it came to Amadou Onana, I felt maybe people were kind of going overboard with it last season at Everton, talking about like how brilliant of a midfielder he was. And very clearly he was a good one, but I was starting to think like, guys, I really hate when we start overrating players after one season in the Premier League because like we automatically act like they're the only midfielder on the market. No one else would be good enough other than Amadou Onana. No one else would be good enough bar Moises Caicedo. Like there's a lot of great players out in world football and you have to really do your due diligence and recruitment and proper scouting to sign these guys before you have to pay over the odds for them. So when it came to Amadou Onana, the way I was hearing, for example, Man United fans talk about him, we have to sign Onana. He's the perfect partner for Kobbie Mainoo. I was thinking, guys, come on. Like, he's a good player. He'd improve us. But if we don't get him, it's not the end of the world. I think I have to hold my hands up here. Because for 60 million euros, around 50 million pounds, how good he's looked right off the bat for Aston Villa, both in how much of a physical specimen this guy is, the goal threat he's already providing for Villa, how dominant he is on both sides of the ball, both defensively and starting attacks for Aston Villa. Mixed alongside the physical presence, how technically gifted the guy is as well too. I think I got it wrong with Onana. Don't get it twisted. I thought he was a good player, but he's actually much better than I thought he was. And yeah, with hindsight, I have to say, I think a lot of teams missed the trick with him. I think Man United more so than most could have really done with Amadou Onana this year. I'm looking forward to the Ugarte signing. I really hope he proves me wrong because I have a bit of doubt about him. But looking at it, I think a better use of funds would have been Amadou Onana to United. That's hindsight speaking, but I think he would have been. Ian Maatsen, look, I think Chelsea recouped a lot of money for 44 million pounds. I think that's a great deal for them. But also, very, very good left back. We saw him in the Champions League for Dortmund. Top deal for them. Ross Barkley has depth. Great signing as well, too. And obviously, he's not a real signing, so I'm not going to count him here, but Morgan Rogers kind of feels like a new signing, right? Really kind of finding his own feet. But I think Villa have done really, really good there. And I think the Amadou Onana signing in particular takes this up for an A for me. Potentially even A+, because I think getting 60 million pounds back for Moussa Diaby, I think is tremendous from Villa. But I'm going to keep it as an A. I'm very impressed with them. Next up, we got Bournemouth. Obviously, the big kind of movement out of Bournemouth this year was selling Dominic Solanke for a club record fee of 64 million pounds to Tottenham. He was obviously their top scorer last year with 17 Premier League goals. They managed to recoup 65 million pounds from Spurs. In his place came Evanilson, the striker from Porto. Very raw, but very, very promising as well too. Securing Luis Sinisterra on a permanent for 23 million euros. Securing Enyes Unyal for 16.5 million. Signing highly touted center back Dean Huijsen from Juventus. For me, one of the coups of the window. Bringing in very promising right back Julian Araujo from Barcelona. That's good business. Obviously bringing in as well too Kepa Arrizabalaga from Chelsea on a loan. Losing Neto on the last day as well too. It was a busy window for Bournemouth. But for the most part, I'm looking at 3 signings because I think the Sinisterra and Unyal one, they're just loans that ended up becoming permanent. But I'm looking at Solanke out, I'm looking at Evanilson in, and I'm looking at Huijsen in. I think selling Solanke and bringing in Evanilson, at the current moment, we have to go and see how it works out. But I think they've gone backwards with that because Solanke was so good for them. But bringing in Dean Huijsen, who in my opinion, Juventus have done a lot of really good things this window, but I think letting him go for as cheap as they did is one of those decisions that for me has question marks all over it. Because I think this guy is so promising. what he showed at Roma last year. This is, for me, one of the most promising young center back prospects in Europe. And for Bournemouth to sign him, when they already actually have a lot of good players at center back. The Ukrainian kid, what's his name? Zabinski, is that his name? Zabarny, excuse me. Next, of course, Marcos Senesi. Bringing in Dean Huijsen as well, too. That's great center back depth for them. I think the Evan Nilsson one, we're going to have to wait and see. But at the moment, I think it's a downgrade from Solanke. But right now, I'm going to give Bournemouth, I'm going to give them a B. It's, again, it could be a C as well, too. But I'm going to go with a B for now. We'll see with Kepa as well, too. I think Neto to Kepa is a downgrade. But I think Huijsen is a massive coup for them, man. Next up, I have Brentford. Now, obviously, the big movement, again, out of Brentford was the sale of Ivan Toney. 42 million euros out to Al Ahly. This was obviously a departure that they were planning for, whether it was to a big Premier League team or to Saudi Arabia. He was always going to leave this window. Brentford managed to get a decent amount of money back for him, 42 million euros. And you kind of saw last season, right? He missed the first half of the year, obviously due to that suspension for betting. And it was a miss, but I didn't think it was a huge miss. I think in his absence, Wissa and Mbeumo have really shown themselves to be very able replacements for him. I don't really feel like Brentford missed Ivan Toney all that much. And when he kind of missed out the first half of the year, many people were expecting, wow, that's going to be detrimental to Brentford. But I think in Mbeumo and Wissa, they've shown there's life after Ivan Toney after all. So they get 42 million euros from him for a 28-year-old turning 29. You take that. You take that. Obviously, you'd rather keep him, but you take it. In his place, the money they've spent, Igor Thiago from Club Brugge, 33 million euros. He's the direct replacement. I don't know too much about him. I'm not going to lie to you guys, but 23 years old. We'll see how he kind of fares over there. Sepp van den Berg, never ever played a minute for Liverpool's first team in competitive atmosphere, but looked very, very good in his loan spells in the Bundesliga last season. They signed him for 23 million. They also bailed out Liverpool by signing Fabio Carvalho for 23 million as well too. Some much needed consistency. Signed Gustavo Nunez straight from Brazil for 12 million. 18-year-old, very promising winger. All in all, decent window from Brentford. I think it's a lot of question marks with the likes of Carvalho, van den Berg, Thiago, Nunez as well too. But I think one thing with Brentford, they've shown to be very, very competent when it comes to signing players. A bit of a moneyball tactic, if you will. But for the sake of this video, and for the sake that we haven't seen much from them yet, I am going to give them a C. I'm going to give them a C. Now, we move to Brighton. Brighton are one of the most busy teams of this window. 231 million euros spent, but also 48 million coming in. Selling Dennis Undav permanently to Stuttgart, offloading Billy Gilmore to Napoli, where he forms a Scottish partnership in midfield with Scott McTominay. Pascal Gross, maybe their greatest player of their modern era, off to Borussia Dortmund. Adam Lallana going back home to Southampton. Dahoud leaving for Frankfurt on a free. They're all gone. In their place, and boy, there's a lot, so bear with me. Breaking their club transfer record, Jorginho Rutter, 46 million euros. Yakuba Minte, very, very promising season at Feyenoord last year. They managed to get him off Newcastle in a PSR swoop, 35 million euros. Mats Wiefer, one of the finest defensive midfielders in Europe last year from Feyenoord, 32 million. Brian Gruda from FSV Mainz, 31 million euros. Kadioglu, very, very good at the Euros, 30 million euros. Matt O'Reilly, 29 million euros from Celtic. Ibrahim Osman, 19 million off Nordsjælland. Yalkuye off Göteborg, 7 million euros. There's a few here and there as well too, but those are the main ones. It's a lot of business. They splashed out 230 million euros. I actually think they might be the Premier League's biggest spenders, or one of them this year. But let's face it as well too, right? A lot of that is due to the fact that they sold Caicedo a year for over 100. They sold McAllister for around 30. They sold Cucurella 2 years ago. Leandro Trossard. And let's be real, they never really splashed the cash that crazy. Like the money that they recouped off all these guys, they never really went and invested it in players of that kind of fee. They went and got some relative unknowns. But this year, I think they've really piled up all the money they collected off all those big signings and said, okay, this year we go crazy. And I think there's some real talent. Just off the first 3 games for Brighton, 2 wins, a draw. A lot of these guys have looked really promising. A lot of these guys we haven't even gotten the chance to see. Kadioglu hasn't played a game yet. Rutter has come in and out of the bench. But I have to be honest with you guys, chat. I think Brighton at the moment are an A+. I think Brighton at the moment are an A+. For me, I'm very, very impressed with the business that they've done. I think they're stacked at this moment, all over the pitch. I look at today against Arsenal, the depth that they're bringing in. Adingra coming off the bench. Their record signing in Rutter coming off the bench. We haven't even seen Kadioglu either. Yes, Pascal Gross is disappointing that they lost him, but he was also getting up there in age. And I think they've replaced him pretty decently as well, too. I give Brighton an A. Or an A+, excuse me. Next up, Chelsea. Chelsea. I actually think I was wrong about Brighton. because I think Chelsea are the biggest spenders this window. Yeah, they are. Like they have been the last like 3 windows, but they are the biggest spenders yet again of this transfer window. Now let's talk about Chelsea's business this summer, and there's a lot of it as well too. So strap in, let me read this off. Pedro Neto for 60 million euros off Wolves. Joao Felix for 52 million euros off Atletico Madrid. Kieran Dewsbury Hall, 35 million euros off Leicester. Philip Jorgensen, 24 million euros off Villarreal. Omari Kelman, 22 million euros off Aston Villa's under-21s. Mike Penders, 20 million euros off KRC Genk. 16.5 million on Anselmino off Boca Juniors. 14 million off Renato Vega from FC Basel. 10 million off Caleb Wiley from Atalanta. 6 million from Mark Guiu, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Guiu, from Barcelona. Tosin Adarabioyo on a free transfer. And Jadon Sancho on a loan with an obligation to buy for 20 to 25 million pounds in a year. Out the other way, Ian Maatsen for 44 million. I think the fact they've got 44 million from Maatsen, again, great player. That's a really good business from Chelsea. Conor Gallagher, 42 million euros. Again, I think good business. 33 million, obviously that's the Lewis Hall deal that's kind of just becoming an obligation to buy now. 30 million from Lukaku, which I think they've done very well in getting 30 million off him, to be honest. Because the fact that he hasn't played for them in like 2-3 years now, he's never going to play for them again after he basically severed ties with the club with that interview. I think they've done really well to get that amount of money. Omari Hutchinson on a permanent for 23 million to Ipswich. And then Thiago Silva leaving, Ziyech leaving, Sarr leaving, Angerin leaving, Mike Penders on loan to Genk, Anselmino on loan to Boca Juniors, Gilchrist on loan to Sheffield. I didn't even know Gilchrist went to Sheffield. Damn. Kepa on loan to Bournemouth, Petrovic on loan to Strasbourg, Chalobah on loan to Crystal Palace, Raheem Sterling on loan to Arsenal, Armando Broja on loan to Everton, and that's basically it. Oh, and Leslie Ugochukwu on loan to Southampton. And breathe. Fucking hell, man. That's a lot of players. Whew. I'm out of breath, man. I'm out of breath. I was going red in the face here. All right. What do I think of this Chelsea window? Let me say this, right? I'm going to focus purely on this window. But if I'm looking overall, because the way Chelsea have kind of been briefing this 2-year plan, David Ornstein came out a year ago, or even at the start of the window, I think he said, don't judge our 4-window plan until the end of this window. That's when you can judge all the business that we've done. Well, if we're doing that, then Chelsea have, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, spent 1.5 billion pounds on the squad at their disposal right now. And if you look at it in totality, there's very talented players. I look at Pedro Neto, can play on either side. I think one of the most exciting players in the Premier League. Cole Palmer, the best business that they've done. A star in European football right now. And Caicedo and Enzo, 2 highly expensive midfielders that are still trying to figure it out at the moment. Lavia, very promising center midfielder. A lot of guys that I really don't know where they fit in, whether it's Nkunku, Felix, Jadon Sancho, Mudryk, which the less said, the better. Nico Jackson, which is probably one of their less hyped up signings, but has actually worked out pretty well, even though for me there's doubts about long-term, can he be the starting Chelsea center forward in a title challenging team. A hell of a lot of center backs, fullback depth, and about 6 different goalkeepers where we still question who's the best one out of the lot. When I look at it in totality, I think they've signed talented players, and I think it's a good squad. However, I'm of firm belief that when you look at their squad as a total, although it's talented, and although there's some good players here and there, I don't think it represents great value for money. For 1.5 billion pounds, I don't think this squad is 1.5 billion pounds great. I don't think so. And also, for 1.5 billion pounds spent, I don't think you have a very coherent squad as well too. I think there's still a lot of question marks. I think you're still missing a quality goalkeeper, which I don't think any Chelsea fan can disagree with me with. And I think, especially this window where Chelsea clearly went in stating, briefing that a center forward was their priority, to exit the window, not signing a single center forward, bar Mark Guiu, who is clearly not ready, I think it's very, very disappointing. Neto is a great signing, can play on either side, and if he stays fit, I think it's a top player. For me, Joao Felix and Jadon Sancho, although are talented, and if you can get the best out of them, you have good players there. But for me, a club signing Sancho and Felix together in 2024 for the money that they did, Felix for 52 million, Sancho for a fee that could rise up to 25. So a combined fee of 77 million pounds in 2024 for Felix and Sancho, I think is outrageous. I am not a fan of that for Chelsea whatsoever. Dewsbury Hall, is he an upgrade on Gallagher? I'm not so sure. I'm not a huge fan of Gallagher, but is Dewsbury Hall much of an upgrade? I'm not convinced yet. And letting Chalobah go to effectively replace him with Tosin Adarabioyo, I think it's a downgrade. So truthfully, I like the Neto signing, and I think they've done very well in sales. But do I think this was a great window for Chelsea Football Club? No, I don't. And I think especially the failure to really tie down a top-level number 9. Obviously, there was the whole drama with Samu. I don't remember his last name, so I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. But Samu from Atletico Madrid. It looked like he was going to come through in the deal with Gallagher. That completely broke down. And I believe it came because Chelsea completely reneged on what they had initially agreed with Samu in the club. And then the whole drama with Victor Osimhen, where whether you like Victor Osimhen or not, because I see a lot of Chelsea fans very mixed about this. Clearly, Chelsea went into this project with a very firm belief that they were not going to overseed what they believed was their wage bill. And in Victor Osimhen, that was a player that if they wanted to sign him, they were going to have to break their wage bill. They wanted Victor Osimhen to effectively take 100K less than he's being paid at Napoli, but make it up in incentives. And Osimhen wasn't willing to do that. So if you don't believe Osimhen is worth breaking your wage bill over, that's up to you. But clearly, one thing you cannot disagree with, Chelsea went into this window desperate to strengthen at the number 9 position. And they have failed to do so. There's still a mess in goalkeeper. I think the center back situation is still bleak despite how many they brought in. And I think a lot of their signings are ones that we have to really wait and see. Where do they fit in this squad? Because on face value, it's difficult to find an answer to it. But I like this. I like the sales that they made. I think they made very good money on the likes of Maatsen, on Gallagher, on Lukaku. I think they've brought in very impressive returns on that. And I like the Neto deal. But the rest of it, for me, spending £77 million on Joao Felix and Jadon Sancho in 2024, I think is absolutely ludicrous. I think it's absolutely ludicrous. For me, Chelsea are a C or a D. They're a C or a D. And I already gave you my thoughts on the Raheem Sterling thing. I'm going to put them at D. I'm putting Chelsea Football Club at D. Crystal Palace. I'm not a huge fan of Crystal Palace's transfer window. Obviously, they sold Michael Olise for 53 million euros. Great deal for Bayern Munich. Joachim Anderson leaving the club for around 30. Sam Johnston leaving the club for around 11. Jordan Ayew leaving for 6. Who was it as well? To Odson Edward leaving the club on a loan to Leicester. Those are all fine decisions. Now, they have brought in Trevor Chalobah on deadline day. I think that's a very, very good signing. They managed to keep Marc Guehi in, which again, very, very good of them. Bringing in Maxence Lacroix from Wolfsburg to replace Anderson. Let's see how that works out. And they finally got in Eddie Nketiah on deadline day for 30 million. Let's not forget as well too Kamada and Ismail Assar. So you know what? I actually say I'm not a fan of Crystal Palace's business. When I look at it now on paper, it's actually not that bad. I think they got a lot of business done really, really late. And before deadline day, it was a lot worse than it actually looked. But after deadline day, I'm looking at what they did. It's decent. They brought in some good center backs. Ed Nketiah, I think, improves them. Let's see if he plays alongside Mateta or if he's depth for Mateta. Sarr, I think, is a player that was crying out for a Premier League move. And Kamada, I haven't really been impressed, but I still think there's a player there. I'm going to go Palace to get a C. I'm giving Palace a C. I don't think they really replaced Olise. They brought in some decent players, managed to keep Guehi, which I think is huge. I'm giving them a C. I don't think they really moved the needle too much. If anything, I think they're probably a worse team than they were at the end of last season, but not by much. So I give them a C. Next, Everton. Everton, first of all, are an absolute mess. They're an absolute mess. And it's another window where more money leaves the club than enters it, which for a team that are battling relegation and looking to actually strengthen is never a good sign. Let's talk about some of the business they did. Obviously, the big one, losing Onana for 59 million. Ben Godfrey going to Atalanta for 12 million. Lewis Dobbin going to Villa for 11. Mopé leaving the club to Marseille. Incoming was Jake O'Brien from Lyon, promising center back. And Dye, who I thought looked really, really good today from Marseille as well too, 18 million. Lindstrom from Napoli. Broja on loan. Oriel Malanga from Lyon. These are decent bits of business. I don't think it's an F. We're looking at F because Everton are a garbage team. But this is why we're talking about it's different how well you did in the transfer window and how good you are as a team, what your team looks like. I don't think it's an F of a window. I think signing Ndiaye is a good bit of business. I think O'Brien is a good player to bring in. And Broja will be decent business as well too. But I don't really think they've replaced Onana in terms of that area of the pitch, and I think there was still more to be done. I think D. I think Everton are D. Fulham are really just building Arsenal Hale End Part 2, I guess. I know, they're basically buying Arsenal's rejects, man. Bernd Leno, Alex Iwobi, Emil Smith-Rowe, Reece Nelson. Jesus Christ, man. Jesus Christ. I think Smith-Rowe was great business from them. 31 million. I hope he can revive his career over there. Bringing back Joachim Anderson to the club after his loan spell a few years ago. Sander Berge as well, too. Great bit of business. I think he'll fit them really, really well. Jorge Cuenca from Villarreal. Bringing back Ryan Sessegnon, fan favorite. Reece Nelson, and then they lost João Painha, which is a big one. Sold Jay Stanfield to Birmingham, which, by the way, getting 17 million pounds for a League One club is crazy. Tim Ream left the club, obviously, as well, too. Bobby De Cordova-Reid left the club. Tosin Adarabioyo left the club. Willian left the club. I think Fulham are a better team than they were last season. Obviously, the Painha one is a big one, but I think it's a very, very good window for Fulham. I'm tempted to even go A. I think they could have gone for a striker, though. Me personally, chat, I have to be real. I'm not sold on Muniz. I have never, I think he had that obviously great month last season, but I'm not really sold on Muniz. I don't think they've ever really fully replaced Mitrovic. So I think they could have done with a striker, but they've signed some really good players. I think A. Ipswich, 126 million pounds for a newly promoted team. Wow. Crazy. Omari Hutchinson for 23 million. Jacob Greaves from Hull for 21. Liam Delap from City for 17. Jack Clark from Sunderland for 17. Dara O'Shea from Burnley for 14. Sami Smodzic from Blackburn for 10.6. Muric from Burnley for 9.5. Ogbene from Luton for 9. Kayuste from Napoli. Connor Townsend from West Brom. Calvin Phillips from City. Ben Johnson from West Ham. Ipswich are really building the championship Dream 11. I think it's decent business, chat. I think Ipswich have brought some really good players. Now, Ipswich, the biggest issue, the biggest worry with these promoted teams, right, is always, are they changing too much up? I remember Fulham a few years ago. I remember QPR a few years ago. I always think it's a bit of a red flag when a newly promoted team brings in too many players. For me, that's always a red flag. I think you want to keep some continuity from Championship to Premier League, at least that first season. Changing too much too quickly is not always great. But if I'm really basing, Nottingham Forest as well too. But if I'm really basing on who they bought, I really like the players they bought, man. Smodzic, I think, was crying out for a Premier League move. Obviously, was the top scorer in the Championship last year. Dara O'Shea, great signing. Jack Clark, great signing. Liam Delap scored a screamer today. Securing Omari Hutchinson full-time, great deal. Jacob Greaves, he looks really, really good. I think it's a B. I think Ipswich are a B. Arsenal right now and B are looking a little suspect. I don't know if Arsenal are going to be B by the end of the video. Leicester. Oh, man. Chat, Leicester are in trouble, bro. Leicester are in trouble. Let's talk about some of their business. Oliver Skip for 23 million. I think Spurs I have no idea how they got that much money for Oliver Skip. I have no idea. Jordan Ayew for 6 million. Jordan Ayew for me is not a player that's helping any Premier League team in 2024. Austin Edward. Mimic what I just said about Jordan Ayew. Buonanotte, I think, is a decent signing. On loan for the year, 19 years old. Has looked good these opening few weeks. I don't know too much about Fatawu and El Kanous. I can't lie to you guys, chat. I'm not very familiar with either of them. Nor Caleb Okoli. Leicester, they have a very good history of recruiting talent. So in that sense, we'll see how they do. But some of these signings, chat, they're not very promising for a team looking to stay in the Premier League. For that reason, I got Leicester. I got them as an F, chat. I got Leicester as an F. I think they're a worse team than they were last season. I think they're a worse team than the team that got promoted a few months ago. Next club, Liverpool. It's a quiet summer for Liverpool, let's be real. Mamarashvili, obviously signing from Valencia, but he's only going to come in, I think, next season. And Federico Chiesa, I think, was a market opportunity that they saw at 12 million and said, look, that's good depth for our front line. Obviously, I think the outgoings for them are actually quite impressive. Vandenberg and Fabio Carvalho for a combined 50 million euros to Brentford. I think they've done really well there. Bajcetic, I think, is going to get some really invaluable loan experience over at Salzburg. I think Liverpool are going to have a good season this year. I have them finishing third. But for me, it's a disappointing window for Liverpool, if I'm being very, very honest with you guys, chat. I think the Chiesa one rescues it from being an F. I looked at this window, and what did Liverpool need? In my opinion, they were crying out for a defensive midfielder, which they've been crying out for last year when they went big for Caicedo and ended up with Endo. And this year, they went big for Zubimendi. They went big for Zubimendi and are left with basically playing Gravenberch there for the rest of the season. There are no DMs available. There are always DMs available. Let's be real, especially with Liverpool. I think that's poor from Liverpool, honestly. And then also, I look at left back as well, too, to be honest with you guys, chat. Yes, Robertson can still do a job, but I think that was a position that Liverpool need to start really kind of like looking for a long-term option there. And I think the failure to even get that as well, too, is disappointing. Like, Chiesa is a good signing. Don't get it twisted. For that price, for how good I think he is, it's a good signing, but it's not a priority. You're just adding to an already stacked part of the pitch. Attack is not where Liverpool needed improvements. I'm tempted to give them an F, to be honest with you guys, chat. I don't really think Chiesa for me is it's a good player, but I don't think Liverpool have. Look, that's not to say Liverpool are gonna have an F season, but I'm judging them on their transfer window. You didn't get your priorities. You didn't acknowledge your priorities. I'll give you guys a D because I think you guys sold well, and I think Chiesa is a good player. But it's not a great window for Liverpool, bro. It's not a great window. I think I'm gonna give them a D. I think the sales, just like Chelsea, right? Just because for me Chelsea got a lot of money for players that I think were not worth anywhere close to those values, I gave them that when I was grading them. I think Liverpool, it's similar. Because the incomings, I think Arne Slot can feel a little let down, personally. Manchester City, I think Manchester City's an A. An A plus even. Maybe an A. Let me explain why. I can be convinced with an A, to be fair, but I'm going to keep them at A plus for now. Signings, Savinho, 25 million. He looks already just right at home. Amazing bit of business. Bringing back İlkay Gündoğan on a free. I don't even need to describe how brilliant that is. Outgoings, 25 million for João Cancelo. 23 million for Taylor Harewood-Bellis. 9 million for Sergio Gomez. They're not even incorporating here the amount of money that they got for the lap, which was, I believe, like 19 million. And then 75 million euros for Julian Alvarez. Look, I like Alvarez. I think he's a great player. To get 75 million euros for him, I think is fantastic business. Now, I can hear an A because did they replace Alvarez? No, they didn't. And I think that's maybe the one area where, for me, they could have done better in this window. But you could even argue, did they need to replace him? Do they have enough already there? But for me, the signings that they brought in and the fees that they've gotten for those players, I think it's terrific business. Maybe I give them an A because I think they needed to replace Alvarez. But even that, getting 75 million for Alvarez, that's not bad, man. That's not bad at all. And I think those two signings are terrific. Next up, Manchester United. Busy window, as it often is for the club. First window under Ineos. And I think there were a few areas that United really needed to target. Ineos really needed to get in lock. First off, clear as much deadwood as you can. And ladies and gentlemen, 103 million pounds in terms of outgoings suggests that a lot of deadwood was cleared. Let's talk about a few of them. 30 million euros for Scott McTominay. Thank you for your service. Academy product. To get that amount of money for him, thank you. Mason Greenwood, the less said the better. 26 million incoming. In terms of getting that amount of fee for a player that was never going to play for your club and taking that shadow away from the club, redirecting it elsewhere, well done. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, 17 million euros off the books. Willy Cambuala, 10 million off the books. Hannibal Mejbri, 6.4. Facundo Pellistri, 6. Donny van de Beek, 500k, but still, to get him off the wages, that's good business right there. And of course, Jadon Sancho, loan what's it called? An obligation to buy. I think United have done well there. And as for incomings, what were the obligations? What were the incentives for Ineos this window? First of all, to add depth in key positions, to raise the technical and physical floor of the team, to add players that can improve you, not just in the current moment, but for the next 5 to 6 years. I think Ineos have done a very good job in all those areas. Let's talk about some of their signings. Lenny Yoro, 62 million euros. Look, it's expensive. It's a player who was on the last year of his deal, but let's be real. If United hadn't made that bid, Real Madrid would have gotten them on their own time. I think United were very ambitious in that deal. It's a player that clearly they, along with the rest of the footballing world, clearly view as a very promising player, not just for now, but for the future. I salute Ineos for that deal. I think it's an amazing deal. Manuel Ugarte, 50 million. Personally, I think it's a touch too expensive. And I have my doubts about if he can solve United's midfield woes. But there's no question that at 23 years old, he is a good player. Is it a great deal? Not for me. Is he a good player? I believe so. Is he probably an upgrade on what we have? I think so. Is it overall a net positive? I would edge closer to yes than no. Matthias de Ligt, 45 million. United needed depth in defense. Lissandro missed almost the whole year. Varane in and out of the team. Lindelof always injured. Johnny Evans is Johnny Evans. United needed a guy that could come in and provide depth while also challenging for a first team spot. You could argue 45 million is expensive for De Ligt. I think a player who's a Netherlands international, playing for Bayern Munich at 25 years of age, I think that's good value. Joshua Zirkzee, Serie A Young Player of the Year last year. Again, a player that adds to the physical and technical floor of the team. Very, very good player in terms of close control, in terms of facilitating for others. 42 million euros, good value for me. Mazraoui, I think, is the best business of the window for United. 15 million euros for a guy who can play either left back or right back. Very, very good footballing IQ. Very, very good footballing fundamentals. Good defender. Great business. I would say United have had a successful transfer window. Now, where does it rank? I think the Ugarte one for me, I've said it. I'm fair, chat. You guys might think I have agendas against clubs. I feel like I'm fair with all these clubs. I don't really hold bias or agenda for any of these guys. I think United could have done better in the Ugarte situation. I think there were better midfielders on the market. I think Onana would have been a better deal. And I do worry that signing Ugarte for this amount maybe holds United back from really being in competition with other clubs for an Adam Wharton in a year or two. I do worry about that if I'm being very honest here. But in terms of whether this window was a success or not, it was more of a success than it was a failure. Let's not forget as well, too, signing Sekou Kone, who is a very, very promising defensive midfielder. And if we're led to believe, he's not being signed for the academy. He's being signed as a first-team player. We'll see how that goes. I think Manchester United, I think they get an A, chat. I think purely on transfers, incomings and outgoings, I think they get an A. I think if I had to choose between A and B, I would say a B plus. But I lean more towards an A than a B. I think the business side of things, like, look, I still have a lot of question marks about United as a team. But for me, those question marks come in terms of tactically, how can Erik ten Hag make us a successful team? That's on him. But in terms of the business that Ineos have done and the team that they have supplied Erik ten Hag, I don't think you can really have much to complain about. I think they've done really, really good business. So I say an A. I'm going to go back though and change things. So for now, I have them an A. That could change. Newcastle. Basically no signings. They signed Vlaho Dimas from Nottingham Forest basically because of PSR. Lewis Hall obviously became a permanent. They sold Elliot Anderson, which I think is a bit of a blow. I actually really like him. They had to get rid of Yankuba Minte, of course, because of PSR. And a big signing for them, if you want to call it. It's not really a signing, so it doesn't count for that. But Tonali is really the big signing. But for me, it's a poor window from Newcastle. Obviously, not much is in their control because they kind of have their hands held behind their back because of PSR and financial fair play. So it's not 100% their fault. And I don't want to sound like I'm too harsh on Newcastle fans, but objectively, it's a bad window from Newcastle. This for me is an F. I think you've lost two really promising players, and your team is not stronger than it was a year ago based on transfers. This is an F for me. Nottingham Forest signed Elliot Anderson, 41 million. Morato from Benfica, center back, 15 million. Milinkovic from Fiorentina, 14 million. I think that's a really, really good deal. Ramon Sosa from Talleres, 12 million. Jota Silva from Vitória Guimarães, 7 million. I like my pronunciation, by the way. They brought in Ward-Prowse on loan. They brought in Alex Moreno on loan. I think those are two good deals, actually. And then in terms of outgoing, Niakate went to Lyon for 31. Vlaho Dimas, we already talked about, went to Newcastle, 23. Mangala went to Lyon briefly for 23. Freuler left the club. I think this is a C, to be honest with you guys, chat. I think this is a C. I think this is a C. There's some good incomings. I think Anderson's a good player. I think Milinkovic, I really like. I think this was a guy that was linked to a lot of clubs for the last few years. Big clubs. I remember United were constantly linked to this guy. I think for Forest to get him for 14 million, I think that's good business. I think it's a C. They managed to keep on to Alanga. That's good business. Yeah, that's a C for me. Southampton. Taylor Harewood-Bellis, 23 million. Aaron Ramsdale, 21 million. Flynn Downs, 17 million. Cameron Archer, 17 million. Mateus Fernandez, 15 million. Ben Brereton Diaz, 8 million. Sugawara, 7 million. Ronnie Edwards, 3 million. Charlie Taylor, free transfer. Ryan Fraser, free transfer. Adam Lallana, free transfer. God damn, they brought in a lot of players. They also brought in as well, too, Maxwell Cornet on loan from West Ham and Ugochukwu from Chelsea on loan. I think those are good signings. Southampton brought in a lot of good players, but you know the biggest thing I like about Southampton's business this window is contrary to Burnley, right, who came up with a strong team, but were unable to kind of elongate those loans for Maatsen and Nathan Tella, who were such big parts of the promotion push. They didn't have them their first year in the Premier League. Southampton have looked at that situation with a guy like Harewood-Bellis, for example, and said, okay, you were a huge part of us getting promoted. We're going to make sure we keep you for that next season. I think they've done really brilliantly there. I think Aaron Ramsdale, right? I never really bought the hype for him at Arsenal, but I think Southampton is probably too low of a level for him. I actually think he'll do quite well for Southampton. Ben Brereton Diaz, I think is a very, very smart signing for 8 million. I think this is a good amount of business for them. And then in terms of outgoings, they lost Alcaraz to Flamengo. Maral went to Strasbourg. Caleta Carr went back to Lyon. Perrault went to Betis. I don't think these are too big. I think Shea Adams may be a bit of a loss for them. We'll see how that goes on. But I actually like this bit of business for Southampton, to be honest with you guys. You guys are saying D and F. I think, guys, you guys have to separate the business to how good the team actually is. Southampton, for me, don't have a great team. But in terms of the business they did, I think it's pretty good business, bro. I give Southampton a C. Southampton are a better team at the start of this window than they were, or at the end of this window than they were at the start. Potentially even B, I hear you. Spurs, big business at Spurs this year. Solanke for 64 million. Archie Gray for 41 million. This is all in euros, by the way. Odobert for 29 million, Bergval for 10, and then obviously in terms of outgoings, Oliver Skip for 23, which I think is amazing business. Emerson Royale, back to Milan. Joe Rodon went back to Leeds. Lo Celso, back to Betis. Perisic, left for Hajduk Split, but he's already leaving. Sessegnon left the club. Tanguy Ndombele left the club. Eric Dyer left the club. Tanganga left the club. Højbjerg left the club. Brian Gill left the club. Solomon left the club. So I think they've done a lot of good outgoings. And they've signed some really, really talented players. To bring in Solanke, I think it's great business. Archie Gray and Bergval are terrific young players that I think are going to be a huge part of Spurs' present, but also their future. Odobert was one that I think a lot of people slept on, but I think he's quite promising as well too at 19 years old. So Spurs are a better team again than they were at the end of they're a better team at the end of the window than they were at the beginning. I think the one issue with Spurs, I think they could have done with another winger, to be honest with you guys, chat. And when you look at Sterling going to Arsenal for as cheap as he did, for basically a free where they don't have to pay all his wages, they could have used a guy like that. A guy like Chiesa going to Liverpool for 12 million. I think Spurs could have used him as well too. Those, like, I think they could have used another attacking option because when I think you look at Werner, you look at Kulusevski, you look at Brennan Johnson, they're solid players. On their day, they can provide a lot, but you needed a bit more in my opinion. But I really like the signings of Bergvall and Archie Gray in particular. So I'm going to go with an A. I'm going with an A for Spurs. And you got your main guy, Solanke as a striker. West Ham, Max Kilman for 47 million. Crescencio Somerville, Championship Player of the Year for 29 million. Niklas Füllkrug from Borussia Dortmund for 27 million. Luis Guilherme from Palermas for 23 million. Aaron Wan-Bissaka from Man United for 17 million. Wes Fotheringham from Sheffield United for free. Guido Rodriguez from Betis for free. Carlos Soler from PSG on loan. Toribo from Nice on loan. And then, of course, outgoings. Flynn Downs for 17 million. Saïd Benrahma to Lyon for 14. Thilo Carrere to Monaco for 11. That's mainly, the big business. Obviously, the likes of Ward-Prowse left on loan. Aguerd left on loan to Real Sociedad. I didn't know that. Wow. Wow. Cornet on loan. Fair enough. I didn't know Aguerd left the club. And obviously, Zuma left the club as well, too. Went to Qatar. Or did he go to Saudi? I think he went to Saudi, Those are good signings. Those are some very, very good signings. I think they've added in big areas. Obviously, Wan-Bissaka at right back. Good bit of business for them. Rodriguez adds them some good depth at defensive midfield. Soler, obviously his time at PSG wasn't the greatest, but I think on loan, good signing. Todibo, I think, is a terrific bit of business. Max Kilman as well, too. I think this is good business, man. This is very, very good business. And obviously, a new manager to top it all off. Is West Ham an A+? I think on paper, it's an A+, chat. What did they really miss? What did West Ham really miss out on this window? Another center back. Mohamed, they signed Todibo and Kilman. I don't know about that. Another striker. They signed Füllkrug. I think Füllkrug is super sub. I hear that. But I think another striker would have kind of been like overkill. I can't lie, bro. What did City do to get into A? They brought back Gundogan for free and they got Savio. Like, it's tough for the best to get even better, but those are two damn good signings. Too many signings. I guess that we'll have to wait and see. I think West Ham are A+, man. I'll be real. Now it's up to Lopetegui to kind of gel everybody together, but I think those are great deals. And then finally, Wolves. Duran would have been a very, very good signing for them, by the way. Duran, I think even for Chelsea, Duran, the way he started the season, that guy's really, really good. Duran has shocked me, bro. Wolves selling Pedro Neto for 60 million, along with Max Kilman to West Ham for 47 million, getting over 100 million euros for those two. It hurts because they were such huge parts to Gary O'Neill's team last year, but damn, that's good money in. And they spent that money on highly touted midfielder Andre from Fluminense for 22 million. I think that has the potential to be one of the bargains of the window. Rodrigo Gomez from Braga for 15 million. Sam Johnston in goal for 11. Let's see if he's able to displace Jose Sa. Pedro Lima from Sport Recife for 10 million. Tommy Doyle from City for 5. Jorgen Strand Larsen, who I think has looked really impressive these first few weeks for Wolves, man. Especially in that game against Chelsea. I didn't get the chance to watch him today, but I thought against Chelsea, despite the loss, I think he looked really, really promising. Carlos Forbes is obviously the Pedro Neto replacement from Ajax. Very, very highly touted. Good business, man. I don't think it's a great window because I think they've lost two cornerstones of that team. And a lot of their signings, it's based on potential. But not bad. Not bad, bro. I think I got Wolves at C as well too, man. Am I being harsh in saying Wolves is like a C? Because I think, look, Pedro Neto and Kilman, it's huge. You got good fees for them, but did you really replace them adequately? I'm not sure about that. Why is City that high? Do you guys really not think City had I think City had a better window than Arsenal, bro. For me, I don't think Arsenal's window was that needle moving, personally. Anyways, this is where I have each team at. Let's go and look back and see, does any team really need to be moved? I think the big one that kind of jumps off the page is obviously Chelsea. Now, if you guys missed that part, the reason I said Chelsea is a D for me is because I don't think the signings of Felix and Sancho are that smart of signings. I think you've really spent a lot on, at this point in their careers, players who have proved to be luxury players that don't really have a defined role in any team they play in yet. And I think you're taking massive gambles on either of them. I think the Neto signing is great, and I think the sales are very, very good. But I think the failure, and it is a failure to sign a top number 9, which you can say I like Nico Jackson or not. Chelsea's prerogative clearly this window was to sign a top 9. You failed to do so. And I think still the question marks over goalkeeper situation. For me, Chelsea, it's not an impressive window. The highest I'd push them up to is a C. So really now, do we want to bump anybody up? Do we want to bring anybody down? Man City, I'm going to keep them at an A because if I'm being harsh, they never really signed an Alvarez replacement. And that's me being pretty harsh. Villa made very, very good deals. Onana, Maatsen, Spurs can't be A. Why not? The one area even with Ugarte, right? Like I say I don't like the signing, but I understand why they made the signing because it's the way Erik ten Hag wants his defensive midfielder to play. So me personally, I would have wanted United to get like a first phase dictator in midfield. But that's not what Man United wants. That's not what Erik ten Hag wants. So in terms of what they wanted this window, I think they got most of their targets, bro. Fulham to B. You reckon? I think Fulham had a really good window, man. Smith Rowe, Anderson, Burge, Nelson. That's a pretty good window, bro. And then they lost Painha. Maybe I hear it. You know what? I hear it. I think the Painha one is a big loss. And like I said, I still don't like the fact that my man up front, Muniz, is really the only striking option that they have. I can hear that. Me, I'm going to leave it like this, chat. I think I'm happy with this list. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. This is just, there's a lot of these guys that I'm not very familiar with that we have to see how they kind of work out. But I'm going to stick with this for now. There's a few that I'm very confident in saying were Fs of signings. I think Leicester and Newcastle have had disastrous windows, in my opinion. Again, unless Leicester's signings I'm not too familiar with just completely take me by shock, I don't think they did enough. And Newcastle did absolutely nothing. Obviously down to PSR, but it is what it is. Chelsea, I spoke about them. I know that's going to cause a lot of controversy, but I don't think they had a great window. Liverpool, I don't think had a great window whatsoever. Everton brought in some decent players, but I don't think they've done enough to stay up. United, I think they've done well in clearing deadwood, and I think they've really added depth in needed positions. I could hear you putting them at B, but I'm going to keep them at A. Same with Spurs. I think I mirror that as well too. City, I think they're an Alvarez replacement from really being an A+, because I think they did good. Brighton and West Ham, I think they won the window. Brought in a lot of quality players. And at Arsenal, like I said, the Sterling thing moved it from a C to a B for me. Guys, I give all my reasoning for each one of these teams. You can disagree all you want, but please don't say like, oh, what the hell are you talking about here? I gave my reasoning. That's up for you to agree or disagree, but I gave my reasoning. For me, that's the most important thing here.